Blockchain technologies and their influence on global sourcing and fashion and their fashion industry. So goodness me, that's a bit of a mouthful. Anyway, to talk about this, which really dovetails in with all the topics that we've been thinking about here in these roundtable sessions devoted to technology. It's an important topic. Once again, it dovetails with what we've already covered. We're lucky enough to have a political scientist researcher with us. We also have three chaps, Gilles, Benoit, and Pierre, perhaps a fourth gentleman. Perhaps you could introduce yourself. I can't really pick out your name on your nameplate, but I don't know whether you're going to spill the water. Anyway, Geraldine, what are you? Are you a researcher? Well, I'm a lawyer by training, in fact, and I'm doing a doctoral thesis. I put to one side my legal practice because I can't do legal work and be a doctoral student. So I'm doing my thesis on intellectual property in the fashion industry as my doctoral thesis. So we'll just go around the table. Benoit, Le Moine, transparency. Traceability, transparency, is that what you deal with? Exactly so. And you established the company? Yes, I'm one of the three co-founders, in fact. A CEO, a COO, and a CTO, and I'm CEO at Transparency. What do you do then? Well, we say trace because it's for short. Transparency, yes, it might be a bit of a mouthful. Well, we're going to change names quickly. We say trans maybe because we're a halfway house to something else. Transparency in its long form. Anyway, we trace, and we have a tracing software that follows the ownership of a finished good from a manufacturer all the way through to a customer, the final customer. So ownership, that's interesting. So you talk about possession and ownership. I suppose the idea of a traded good, but also usage. Usage is very important. Clément Berger, yeah, Honest. I'm one of the co-founders and the chairman of Honest. At our company, we're more in the world of logistics. We use blockchains to trace the responsibility of people on the value chain. So this involves internal, but also external chains. So we're involved in IoT, which is crucial in the fashion industry, isn't it? That's right. Lots of heavy investments have been done in logistics. Yeah, logistics is the lifeblood of companies. We've got major retailers, big companies, chemical product companies, fashion designers who need to optimize and streamline their logistics, and that's why we provide them support. So thanks to your technology and your outfit, you track traceability right from one end to the next of the train. That's right, we've got 100% traceability. In other words, we know who is responsible for what in any logistical loop. There was a big e-trader known to one and all who came to us to have better visibility, or even down to a parcel. Sometimes it's a parcel, it could be spare parts, or it could be a specific item, or even a pallet. It really changes for one thing to the next. But lifeblood, logistics, and it's important for any business, and particularly for fashion, for being swift and agile. Of course, that's part and parcel of the fashion industry being swift. Mr. Garcia, you're replacing Gilles Bonobo. Well, Gilles is nice, but we prefer to have you. Well, that would avoid having two Gilles around the table, wouldn't it? Absolutely. We almost had two Clements, I point out, usefully. Anyway, so, Charles, tell us all about it. Well, I'm the founder of CFEN. I don't know whether you're going to do better with me or with my colleague anyway, but at CFEN, we have technology, which was established not too far ago, 2015, what, 3 or 4 years then? All right then, so you have technology, you were saying. Yes, our technology gives a digital imprint for a product. It gives it a singular identity that cannot be copied and forged, and anybody, therefore, with a smartphone can check what they're dealing with in a space of a few seconds. So it's used by standard Joe in the street as well as corporates? Yeah, absolutely, by both people, public and private. So a consumer, anybody in the world, can bring out their smartphone in 1 or 2 clicks, can check whether the product they're buying is authentic, irrespective of anything else. The authenticity of the product. Yeah, it could be that, it could be its quality, it could be where it comes from, anything you want, because each object has its own singular identity. So, to provide a summary, I suppose each one of you has a knowledge, an application, or a technology, or an innovation which is clearly defined, and they all work together, they all complement each other and supplement each other. Do you cross-pollinate in that way, usefully? And yes, I think yes, we do provide a complement to each other. How can I put it? For a product gets from A to B into the lap of the consumer, there's lots of work done ahead of time in the distribution channels, for example. So what do we do? Well, the final customer has a way of entering into the equation, but lots of things have happened beforehand. Yes, it is complementary. So you'll say complementarity should avoid complexity, though. Well, that's right. When you see the ability to have singularity in the blockchain, it's great to trace digital objects, and so you can make authenticity signatures. And that was our starting point. We said to ourselves, it's all very good to have B2C analytics, but you need to have everything upstream entering into the fray, from manufacturers all the way through to the end user. So why not have an authenticity certificate that's end-to-end? So you need to get in there right from the start. And that's what we've done for a number of years. We've established trust and confidence, and we show responsibility for the entire logistical chain. So we know that in each point, each link, we know what's going on. To talk about luxury goods, for example, and you can say that here is an authenticity certificate, but what matters is the origins, the provenance, to say right from the outset, this is the trace that proves where it comes from, right from end to end. That's why we've focused our efforts, and we've set aside, if you like, authenticity certificates in the fashion by looking at that specifically to work on responsibility chains. And once we've secured the logistics, well, in the future, players can offer these certificates. And so we are a complement to everybody around the table, because all the protocols that we've set up are in the public domain. GS1, for example, means that the blockchain technology is obviously first and foremost decentralization. So there's no idea of something being owned by somebody singularly. So we have a protocol of responsibility transfer, so we can have this chain of responsibility for these products. And we have companies that whose stance is to use the protocol to provide greater bona fides in each step of the process. Oh, goodness me, you're very clear. You could be a teacher. So massive clarity then for the blockchain. That's very important, because this word is bandied about in finance or in other sectors. It's bandied about a lot, but in the realm of fashion, it takes on a different connotations. But it's also a savoir-faire. It's experience. It's technology, isn't it? Well, for me, this revolution, when we talk about blockchains, what are we talking about? Per se, it's not fabulous technically. The genuine revolution is the consensus that's sitting behind it, that binds it together. It's intrinsic to the blockchain technology. I don't know whether we've got much time. Well, yes, well, there's not many of us around the table, but you haven't got an hour. But well, I'm not going to define the blockchain. I'm just going to say that if I give you a Bitcoin, for example, all I'm doing is going to inscribe a transaction, and I'm going to say there's 1 Gilles equals 1 Bitcoin. that transaction and is going to put in a little basket, transaction basket, waiting for it being validated. The miners, one miner is going to take that out of the basket, and well, the coin has gone from Gilles to Clement, and then I see that Clement has got 5. He spent 4, so now he's got 1 left. So yes, he can give it to Gilles as payment. And then he sees that transaction is correct. He puts it into a block which contains thousands of other transactions, and that block is therefore part of the register. And that's why we talk about a chain of blocks that contains thousands of transactions. The revolution, that's interesting itself, but of course the revolution really is that when I give you a Bitcoin, I don't care about the blockchain. I don't care about the miners. I do apologize, Gilles, and I don't really give a damn about you. My sole objective is to prove to you that I have a value-loaded Bitcoin. I act egotistically. What you want to do is to get that Bitcoin. You don't care about me. You don't care about the chain. And so the third player, the miner, what does he want? He wants to secure the block, because if he's the first to secure the blockchain, then he can earn a huge amount of money. So he doesn't give a damn about the Gilles or Clement. No, he wants to secure the blockchain. So the revolution is that we have collateral effects, the individual egotistical objectives of each one linked into a paradigm which is secure. So without any political support, or even with political contrary winds, headwinds, without any financial support, it's only underpinned on individual egotistical objectives in a virtuous, secure environment. And that's why it's a consensus. If we have a blockchain product, you've got to get that consensus, which for me is the revolution. And that's why I never talk about the blockchain by defining it. No, because you need to understand the consensus. That's what progresses things. Because if you have a good consensus, well then it can be operable for many, many years independently without anybody extracting equity financially from it. It's interesting because yesterday we made mention of blockchains. We heard about Cohen, about Mothers, for example, which was established a few years ago, which prompts the development of fashion brands. And he said, he told us about this system, which may seem borderless without any regulatory framework, in a particular mindset, evolves in a particular mindset. And it's interesting to frame it, and that's why we're talking about innovation, I suppose, because we're embarking on a new adventure, on the threshold of a new world. When we're talking about fashion or any sector, at the end of the day, it's part and parcel of tangible manufacturing that's looking forward to the future. That's why I think it's really interesting, and I'm listening to you with a greedy ear, if I can put it that way. Yeah, well, quite clearly, it's a change of paradigm. And if you're changing your paradigm, you're moving from one capitalistic model, individualistic model, to a decentralized, non-capitalistic model, based on a consensus, exactly. There's no value judgment for one or the other. But I'm just saying, you can't have the same model built on different underpinnings. So once you've got that new paradigm, you have to build it up from scratch. And that's innovation. We've got to start from scratch. And so that involves a huge amount of work. And that's why we all need to be involved.
So you're not all on your own. They've got Charles supporting you, Benoit as well. So how do you integrate inclusively? How do you integrate all this? Well, we do it very inclusively. And so I share what Charles and Clément said. In terms of that we have very complementary systems. The word which kind of brings us together concerning our different projects and companies is the word traceability. Traceability then, well, this is what we call trace, in fact. And so I'm very happy to hear you talk about this. I was going to ask the question in a moment. Traceability, it's a very nice word, but it means an awful lot of things. But it has a different meaning in each of the value chains. And I am indeed referring to value chains. So traceability then it is meaningful for a chain. We can talk about internal traceability, but a trace in terms of a production chain, an assembly chain, or traceability, for example, in terms of production, distribution, sales, and even consumption and the second-hand market. All those are value chains. So the aim of traceability then is to create an information chain which faithfully reflects the physical chain of actual flows. So blockchain is a wonderful tool for that. It allows you to create digital assets which are unique. We couldn't do this before, and that thus reflects the reality of the various products. So I don't know whether Sifema would agree with me. Each object should have its own unique identity. Now, blockchain has to be given to companies who work on these value chains. They'll be the ones who will be consuming and handling the products. So how do you distribute this blockchain? Well, this is the work that we actually do. And this is where we are complementary. So Areni is not represented here, but they have provided a blockchain protocol, and we concentrate on the application side. Now, if we take a parallel, which is, so if Ariane provided internet, then we would provide an application or a website that would use that. So this is where we're complementary. So CIFEM gives an identity to a product, for example, and we, an Honest or Ariane, will be able to put this into a unique asset. So we will take that information and we will allow people to manipulate this information, enrich the content, and once it's recorded in the blockchain, we'll have several kind of user cases. What do you mean by user case? Well, the use of this word traceability in a given instance. So this is applied to specific situations. For example, a textile that's going to be made into a product, the traceability will be different for that product or different products, but all products need to be traced and traceable for very different reasons. Because for the producer, the consumer, etc. And in our company, we have very specific user cases that we deal with, and we try to solve these and then move to the next user case. So that's the approach that we adopt. So thank you for that. You're all very impressive. Charles, do you want to add something to that? Yes. To react to what's just been said, there are two sides to this. Two sides in terms of this relationship with blockchain. We have the interface with the virtual side, but that particular interface has to be connected to the real world. So blockchain has to make sure that a virtual identity is certified, traceable, but then we have to make sure that that virtual identity is connected to one real thing. And how do you do that then? Do you do it? Yes, we can. We can do that. So we create an identity, a physical identity, that is, a unique identity that we can then recognize. So it's virtual, yes. So blockchain gives a kind of visa, if you like, to Clément, for example, and CIFEN has to make sure that that the photo that's on the passport of is indeed Clément. So this idea of the passport is very interesting. This system has been around for a long time. We often give the example when we go to see prospective customers. When we talk about our system, we talk about the kind of driving license. So you quoted Clément's passport. We use a driving license, but blockchain is no more or less than the ledger that you have at the police station, for example, which is a list that makes a list of all the different names of people who have a car, and then you have next to the name you have the registration plate, and so this is in the driver's license. And when you have a transaction involving a car, then you change the name that's on the car ownership document. So blockchain allows you to avoid that particular step, and the transaction is done peer-to-peer without having control authority. So this is why it's very centralized. This is what we said, and so it's also a great tool. It allows you to make confidence-based transactions between two people, and based on identity that's not very well secured. So, for example, we could take your for example, username might be your name. So the only way you can prove that it's me is to have my identity papers. So the digital username, we have to make sure that corresponds to the product. But what about if somebody steals the username? So I wanted all our friends to give us information that can be verified legally. We talked about traceability, verifiability, we talked about consensus. Now, from a legal standpoint, just some information now. Just let me say two things. I think that we have to separate the technology from the information. Blockchain is a technology, so it is a tool. Yes, it's a tool. But that technology allows us to store, to register, to transfer a certain number of data. And that data, and this is where it gets interesting, that data can have the value of an asset. It has a financial value. Now, this is why we get into this debate about all these new values, these new assets that have come out of this digital society, this information society, if you will. So we're now wondering about personal data, the issue of intellectual property, the issue when we talk about traceability, the rights of consumers, for example, defective products. So you guarantee that the chain has gone from A to B to C to D, etc. But within that chain, if there's a defective product, who do we get in touch with? So this is where the issue of proof comes in. So the issue of proof is basically about now want to be able to prove that often blockchain involves questions of intellectual property, and fakes, issues of fake products and things like that. So there are new obligations in terms of intellectual property and also in terms of responsibility as well. So we've got traceability, so we can guarantee the first step, the second step, yes. So traceability then allows us to control the whole of the responsibility chain, if you will. So but that doesn't necessarily mean that the people involved are responsible. So we have to be careful with the words that we use. When we talk about traceability, that's one thing, but responsibility is another. So you can't guarantee responsibility. So we talked about authenticity as well. That's a very nice term, not a legal term. So this is why I was waiting for your reaction. No, we're lucky enough to have these legal people with us, so we have to raise awareness around these particular issues. In terms of traceability is not an end in itself, because traceability of a product, well, we don't really care about that. So I was wondering about this. I was wondering, is it important to know whether my parcel is somewhere between A and B? So, but there has to be a point to this. So unless you're dealing in weapons that shouldn't, but Anyway, all products can be replaced, but in terms of logistics, the issue is who's going to pay for that replacement of that product, and this is where there is a certain responsibility. Who is responsible, contractually speaking, not from the blockchain point, but who is responsible, contractually speaking, with all the different international standards and laws that exist on responsibility? Who is going to pay for this? And this is the work that we do. We have to be able to know exactly who has had this product in their hands at what time, and that person is responsible for this product because he physically owns it. So this responsibility can be legal responsibility, criminal responsibility, material responsibility, contractual responsibility. So this means that we're not specifically talking about a financial responsibility. We just need to know at what point in time you had the physical responsibility for that product. And this allows me then to apply this legal concept of contractualization and apply any sanctions. And that particular piece of data, logistics never had that before. Let me give you a concrete example of this. So you have rather sensitive products, so we have geolocalization trackers on this. So this was a holy grail in the world of fashion. So we put a tracker on the product. This product goes into a logistics area. It goes off, and then we say, okay, this product has disappeared. Okay, so then you say, okay, well, don't worry, I've got my geolocalize tracker. So you find the product in a warehouse. So you go to the warehouse, and then you find your tracker, but you don't find the product with it. And then you say, okay, well, I'll find it somewhere in the warehouse. So let's get in touch with the warehouse manager. This is your fault, and he says, and this is something that actually happened. And he'll say, no, it's not my fault. The product is no longer here. So that means that I've sent it on. I've dispatched it. So it's not my fault. So we have this idea of geolocalization and traceability, but we've got no person who is responsible. And so this is why the chain of physical responsibility for a product is absolutely key in this blockchain process. And we didn't invent this. This was invented by others. So change of paradigm now. So Geraldine, go ahead. So I completely agree with you. In terms of this equation now, there's one thing that's missing. There's always something unknown in terms of an equation, and this is the magistrate. The magistrate in France doesn't yet recognize proof from blockchain. So this is an issue of intellectual property, because blockchain is kind of above the law. So it's a system, not a parallel system as such, but so I think that this is because there haven't been any cases of this kind, so there's no jurisprudence on this.
La blockchain.
So blockchain is accepted as evidence in Italy. It's been true for the last few months now. I think France will soon, it will be true for France soon, but the judge, he can choose evidence and feel that it is admissible, and that is therefore with possibly contracts, but smart contracts will turn up later, but initially it's about forgeries or defective goods, because the judge, he's going to need evidence, hard evidence, and harder than which the parties can provide. One of the parties will say, I've got blockchains, and the judge in his ruling will have to contemplate the matter of the blockchain, unless there's a interlocutory problem that occurs. But anyway, the French judiciary is waiting for the right case to appear to establish case law. Well, yes, that's exactly what she's saying. In a number of countries, we're lucky enough that evidence is free, and you can adduce evidence freely. So we need the evidence, and that's important, and that's part and parcel of responsibility. Of course, you can ground yourself or rely on a legal document, which is a expedition letter, let's say, or shipping letter, but there are problems in the operations. Maybe there's the signature is not legible, or what have you, or there's problems with something like that. So here I've got the beginnings of an item of evidence that says that one individual person, without any external constraints, took responsibility at a given point for a product. But there's not one witness, there's just a paper. But there are thousands of computers around the world that are witnesses to the fact, if you like. And so that is hard evidence. It's like, I don't know, historically, how can I put it? Beforehand, I worked in contracts, life insurance contracts. I did a bit of law in my training. But anyway, you sign, and it lasts for 30, 40 years, such a contract. But the insurers themselves, in the transition period, went out on a limb and it said, I'm not having any handwritten signature. I'm going to have an electronic converging evidence to be more impactful when it's brought before the judge. Because it's a very powerful method, that, rather than a handwritten signature. And so they feel they've got peace of mind where going before a judge, rather than having a handwritten signature, they like the various numbers of sources of evidence that cross-pollinate and that are more weighty in their probative value. Yes, but what we need to keep at top of mind is the fact the judge has a huge a huge possibility of discretionary powers by when he evaluates the evidence. And case law will come necessarily, and it will come because more and more blockchain users are going to come before a judge, and case law will be fleshed out. So things will be driven by users. If users feel that for them it's a worthwhile tool, a valuable tool, well then necessarily the matters will be brought before a judge. So yes, you talk about users. Sorry, did you want to step in, Benoit, on this matter? No. Okay. So users, because what I'm hearing from you and what I find interesting in relation to our topic, of course, everything we're talking about here should revolve around the matter of fashion, but generally speaking, as a general proposition, you're talking about the economy. Traceability in the fashion world is perhaps more important because sourcing it involves seeing what's going on in Bangladesh, Pakistan, the other side of the world, or what's done in Ethiopia and what have you. But unless countries aren't under the same legislation, which is obviously the case, and the situation you describe is universal, then it's borderless in what you're talking about in terms of jurisprudence. So, be it fashion or foodstuffs, where sourcing is important, no doubt the rules are applicable. You wanted to say something, Charles? No, I had a question. Off you go. Yes, but case law in Italy. What established Italian case law? I don't have the legal sources. I can find the legal source, the legal authorities. Yes, but what prompted the case law to constitute itself originally? On what case? Was it a fashion case? No, it wasn't from fashion. If memory serves, it was. What was it? It wasn't fashion. No, I'm sorry, I can't recall. It wasn't fashion. So it was a consumer good. No, it was a forgery, a forgery case. Yeah, forgery. Of course, it's altogether different. No, it's very, very, very close because a blockchain is a tool per se in terms of intellectual property. Currently, you can have its creation that confers you the right to claim that you were the author. But there's no evidence, in fact, that you created the good. A blockchain not only establishes what happened at the finished good stage, but also throughout the entire creative process. That can be blockchained. And all that creative process means that you can authenticate the end product in addition to everything else that happens upstream. It's authenticity, right? Authenticating a product is good because some things will converge from different directions in order to provide something with more probative value. Yes, in France, we've got the solo envelope, which is dated, and you sign and date it across the seal. It's simply to say, this is what I did at a given point of time. You have the postage stamp placed across the seal of the envelope, and you've signed it. So, I don't know, you might draw an iPhone, let's say, and I want to show it to Apple commercially to offer the design. I have an envelope that I've put that design in to avoid anybody stealing it from me, because I've got it dated. Yes, but there are rights that you gain when you have a trademark. But as an author, I have author's rights. That's fine. But it all boils down to evidence. And the major problem for intellectual property is the date of creation and evidence to the fact. So if you put your musical score or in an envelope, and then you seal it, and then you sign across it, and it's postage stamp, fine. Yes, but it costs €7. You have to do it manually. Well, maybe the price has fallen, I don't know. But anyway, it can't be automated. But with a blockchain, to do exactly the same operation, you don't need to move. It's digital, and it costs you micro centimes of €1. And it's not time consuming. This is what we say to all our customers. And they say, oh, we'll do it with you. And I said, well, no, just take an intern and I'll do it for you. Just imagine the entire creative process of all your workers, of all your designers and researchers in the space of every 10 minutes is recorded, time-stamped and what have you. Time and date stamp for that matter. So, the biggest theft, idea theft, is done by the employees themselves. They've got, they're at work, they discover something, and then at 6 p.m. upon leaving work, they give it to the competition, and potentially then that competitor will file property rights. In pharmaceuticals, for example, also in fashion, that occurs. And so when you have this prior tendering of the idea, that can be the beginnings of evidence. Yes, what's of interest as well is that this technology, as you've said very clearly, which is highly accessible, which is not only goes to matters within a company, but also as a creator independently. A freelancer, for example, will have the same tools at his avail just as much as a corporate, big business. Examples abound. And the authenticity certificate, going back to that, a freelance creator who does he's punching out his first collections for a fashion fair, his technical resources and his financial resources, he can start to trace and secure his assets. Why? Well, because this technology doesn't need a state or an institution. It's free, unfettered. And it can be totally individual in the approach, to the extent that you want to protect and safeguard your own creations. But anyway, it's a change of paradigm, isn't it? If you're in a decentralized universe, everybody needs to be liable and becomes liable or responsible for safeguarding their own operations, which is a major challenge. You were talking about. We often wag our finger at the absence of case law, but in my view, that lack flows from another deficit, if you will. In other words, a lack of adoption of that technology, because we are switching paradigm. Yes, but this technology encompasses what volumes are we talking about here? What are the numbers? Well, for us, our little outfit, we've got hundreds and hundreds of shippers on a daily basis that use the blockchain in a secured and individualized fashion to do liability transfer. Between now and tonight, there'll be lots of transactions, and the users, who are they? They are logisticians, truck drivers. They don't necessarily speak French, but they use this technology. And as Geraldine said very clearly, it's a tool. Blockchain is a tool. So they can't see it. That's all the interface is crucial, therefore. When you do an online payment, for example, when you buy something on the web, you are using highly complex cryptography and secure payment technology, but everybody uses it. With a blockchain, you want to keep a high level of security, used in conjunction with interfaces that drive up adoption.
So a small deployment on a market which is huge, nevertheless. So everybody will be calling you up at all times, or calling up Cephen to try and get access to your services. Well, so is it a lack of distribution, shared information? So where is the limit? Each person has to become responsible. So I get scared when people start talking about that. So perhaps it's not desirable. Perhaps there should be more centralized, where we can work with any kinds of volumes. So for a very small volume, this is just a sticker that you need to put on the parcel, and that's it. But we also work with small French startups that want to have a presence abroad, and that's a great market. So we want to have a very high quality product. There's a huge demand in many countries, particularly Asian countries. And so this opens up many markets for those people who couldn't up to now secure their products. So you can't conquer new markets, or they couldn't. So sometimes they found it difficult to get verifiable information from certain countries, and so now this is a possibility that you are proposing. Let me give you an example. I worked with a company who was producing smartwatches. So again, it's a fashion accessory. Well, it's a tool, as we said, so we're moving slightly away from fashion. But the product, so this was done through crowdfunding. The item hadn't come out, and yet there were false watches that were already being made and available online. Now, somebody in France who wants to launch a product in Asia, so there will be a lot more, many more fake products than there are here. So they just add this traceability system. He adds that, and then he can say to his customers, okay, well, you can check the product that you have bought is indeed yours, and that gives him the possibility. Whereas before you had to go through the customs agents, you have to have international agreements, so that this was unmanageable for a small producer, but now it is possible due to this technology. Well, this is very interesting. Let me go back to the user case that we were talking about. So in terms of fashion or other cases, blockchains as a tool which allow us to have this traceability system, it has to meet an objective. Why did we have the car registration document? Because it allows us to establish a responsibility and to find the car if it's stolen. So we launched this traceability system for cars with the aim of responding to certain questions. Now, in fashion, it's the same thing. We've got fake products. So what's the provenance of this product? So if we look at the market today from the consumer standpoint, there's a growing demand for information concerning provenance. In terms of environmental responsibility, social responsibility. The second-hand market is exploding, and all those services surrounding a product. If I buy a watch, for example, from a jeweler that cost me several thousand euros, well, it's a bit like buying a car. So there has to be an after-sales service. If I want to resell that watch, sell it on. So you're never really the owner of a watch. You can be the guarantor for a generation. So Tech Philippe said this. So developing a traceability system due to blockchain, this allows us to secure this service offering, and it allows us to deal with the user case in terms of fashion. Now, in order to diffuse and spread this technology, so that many consumers and companies can adopt this system, we have to find the right user case. Changing a paradigm is quite complicated. This is well rooted in our cultures, our mindsets. So moving from a system which is centralized, where we process information, we talked about geolocalization, but blockchain allows you to do things transactionally, but for geolocalization there's no transaction, so it's just about a tracker, whereas before we had no transaction concerning responsibility before. So this is why we had this problem with the guy in the warehouse. So the warehouse manager said, I've done my bit, and the product has been dispatched. So I think it's very important to ask why we should use blockchain for traceability. So you talked about the second-hand market, which is really taking off. People really want this. It's 20 billion in terms of luxury goods, so a very significant market. So it's become a huge, huge market, and it's ongoing. It's a new way. So this is all about attitude. So this is done for various reasons: financial reasons, ethical reasons, moral reasons, practical reasons as well. There are many people who buy second-hand goods, or many people who rent their garments. So there's a certain sense of responsibility there, where traceability should influence and have an influence on the user or the person providing the garment. So this is why, and this is what Tech Philippe says in terms of being a guarantor of the watch. But the same thing can be applied to any product. When we're talking about the circular economy, so let's say we have a kilo of steel because we're using it for a certain thing. So this is just about transmission of a product and different uses at a different time for this product. So this is all about. It's all a circular process at the moment. Second-hand products, this is just the first step of the second-hand process. So a product is produced for a certain use, and then it will be transferred to another person that will use it for a different purpose. Between the first hand and the second hand, there's not the same goals, and then the product may just be put in the bin. So this is all about the circular economy and the need to really have traceability. Then substitution of a product. When a product is consumed, we're talking about fashion. This is something physical, but it's consumed. It can be torn. But what about a product which is consumed, like wine, for example? At what point can we destroy the tracker? At what point will we consider that a bottle has been opened and it can't then be sold on the secondary market or the second-hand market? So who is the end consumer? So do we have to monitor the end consumer? Well, in terms of the wine market, yes. So let's say you buy the wine, it hasn't even left the chateau. So there are 50% of some wines that are resold or sold on before they're even delivered. Then you stock the wine. People can also speculate on wine. There are specific sellers in Geneva for storing wine, and then it's kept for 10 years and then it's sold on elsewhere. And of course, there's lots of fake wine produced. So you just empty the content of the bottles and fill it with something else. But you have ways of blocking this process. So there's a real logic behind this. So the museum of the counterfeit museum that also exists. So in one of their display cases, there's an amphora, a vase, a Roman vase or bottle that contained wine. and it was fake. All things that have a value have been reproduced or faked. So I've seen fakes of all products, not just products that with a high value. I've seen false eggs, false toothpaste, and even false round tables, says Gilles. So yes, so this is excellent for blockchain. It's not just about counterfeit luxury products. We know that the medicines as well are. It's a real issue in terms of producing fake medicines. So I think the blockchain once again would be useful for that, and also for spare parts. We have a very concrete example in terms of wine. We had a company, a spirits company, that contacted us in order to protect their bottles, and also protect the consumers when they buy and consume wine. So they had a major problem of people taking the bottles and then filling them up with something else. So they needed our system so that they could retrieve the bottles that were deposited. But they had to make sure that those bottles were indeed the original bottles. Because there are some very smart people that were passing on bottles that weren't the original ones. So we do need traceability at all levels. And even when it comes to recycling. So what about these tools then? And so we're talking about fashion, this is about value production. What about these tools? Do they strengthen the value of a product? If you're able to provide traceability, authenticity, so this provides assurance for the consumer. So that is what's good. So the marketing discourse is so powerful now. If people tell me that my product is a really high quality product, but people don't believe this anymore because of the marketing hype. But if I'm able to know exactly where my product has come from, now that really is a luxury, and this is what the luxury brands do. So when you buy a bag, for example, a luxury bag, if you have the authenticity stamp concerning the skin, the leather that's been used. So I know exactly where my product has come from, and so this means that luxury brands are proposing a real luxury product that's in line with their marketing discourse. So this difference between communication, marketing, and the reality. So sometimes there's a real distortion between luxury goods and pseudo luxury goods. But now we can trace everything that's not visible, so that we are actually sure that we're getting a luxury product. So Sifen, we have a very concrete experience in that. Medicines, for example, the difference. So there are many brands or not, many cases where people will spend what's necessary to buy a real product, but they get a false product without knowing it, and it doesn't work. So retrospectively, this brings down the value of the brand. So I've paid so much for a bag which didn't last even a week. So given the possibility to ensure people that we are actually buying what we want to buy, this object is indeed a high quality product. Retrospectively, this is good for the brand image. So if you have nothing else to say, we'll go to the conclusions. And we're going to ask people in the audience if they have any questions to ask. I just want to give a word of caution. So often blockchain is presented as a kind of silver bullet, so it's a proof of the authenticity of a product, but there's always a concern. Blockchain is, at the end of the day, just information, and tracing a product that's been identified by CIFEM or by the car registration or identified by a label, the digital asset and the digital reflection of this physical object is, at the end of the day, it's a number. So I can buy a real watch with a serial number which is recorded or registered, and this will correspond to the digital asset, and so we have another watch that has the same number. So we just have one digital asset that corresponds to the watch. So if somebody selling a watch wants to transfer the property of that watch, then it does leave quite a lot of room for fraud. And basically what we say, that the system that we have based on blockchain allows people who want to take these precautions, who want to protect themselves. Of course, it doesn't solve all problems. Somebody who wants to commit fraud will always do it. So that's where the legal people come in. Perhaps we can ask the people in the audience has any comments or questions to put to these specialists. Do you have a question? So thank you, Benoit. Can you say who you are and for which company you work, what kind of research you're involved in? Itsuko Yesushi. I was a headhunter in a previous life in design and fashion, and I advise fashion brands, and so I work for a startup. It's on blockchain, and in terms of what's been said, major problem is that the user cases are very limited at the moment, whereas blockchain is quite simple technology. So yes, it's simple, it's efficient, it's easily accessible, but designers, when we talk, and creators, when we talk about this, and we mention blockchain, so it's much too complicated for me. So I think that we have to do the education here. We have to educate people, and this is why you are here. So I think that this roundtable was proposed, and with Geraldine, we try to get this message across. For the 1st of September, everything on our platform can be deposited free of charge, so that people are no longer afraid of blockchain, so that they understand that it's a tool which is easy to use, just as easy to use as email. But there's a big issue in terms of energy as well. We have to manage that as well. It takes up an awful lot of energy, and so we need to find a solution to that. So thank you for that. So can somebody answer that? So the lady just behind you, you were telling me what you were doing. So you have all the guarantees that you need for your work.
Yes, because I trust my product, and my offer is bona fide. So this traceability is very important. Very important. That's right. Because when I sell a product, I want the person to trust the product and receive the guarantee that can be kept for life, that the article is authentic. And that is part and parcel of the value that I'm offering. Traceability is crucial. When I create a photograph, for example, it's crucial that people don't necessarily believe what I say, but they can see with their own eyes what I'm offering them, that it's delivered. That's interesting. The fashion world has certain virtues in what it's saying and what it embodies. We talked about feelings on the behavioral roundtable that we addressed, but also sincerity. And I think sincerity has a huge importance. Of course, like any word, words are easy, and you might think that you're playing with words, but it is important because a consumer today who's well-informed, ill-informed, or not informed enough, but these customers can adhere to things that are extremely sensitive, and sincerity is crucial over and beyond the beauty of color, texture, in what conditions the articles are put together. I mean, sincerity, of course, is highly subjective, but I think henceforth we can trace. I don't know how, because I'm not an expert, but of course we can trace these subjective criteria. Yes, just like trust. Beforehand, trust had an intrinsic value. When you sold a diamond, for example, it was enough to shake someone's hand, to look each other in the eyes, for trust to be imparted. But it's harder now to trust. But we can prove trust on the commitment that we take out, and can be checked, is borne out by time, if you like. It's not all about advertising, what have you, because anybody can do that. Time will tell. There are values that require more time to be consolidated, but people need to commit. It's important to see how technology, ultimately, I suppose that's the upside of technology. Technology, therefore, is an asset. Benoit, thanks very much for handing around the mic. But it's crucial, isn't it? Would you like to add something? No. Sincerity and the work, the real work put behind the product, and to give value to that. When you're buying a product, you're buying a story, if you will, a narrative. Narratives are manufactured, and that's why people want more traceability, not only to know this, that, and the other. No, they want a narrative, but a genuine narrative, not something that's served up cheaply and that they have to swallow. And that is part of decentralization. It gives value to people who take the necessary time. We talked about wine, haven't we? Oh, it's true, a wine, the same wine that you're drinking in your own home in Paris when it's grey skies outside doesn't have the same taste when you're drinking it in the south of France with some friends, because there's a context, there's a backdrop, and also you went maybe to see the wine grower and you had a chat with the wine grower and now you're drinking his wine. So the taste of that wine, which is exactly the same, differs nevertheless because a different value is ascribed to it. It's true for garments, for luxury, for fashion. It's the same thing. Today, resources are limited. When you buy a garment, I want to buy something that's got a narrative, which is meaningful, and absolutely not a wrong or false story, so I have a grievance. No, we're not necessarily in the fashion world, but people from the fashion world have come to see us. There was a big, major luxury brand that said, at the end of the day, a garment is a consumable. It should last 2 or 3 months. And then I fell off my chair almost. I said to myself, you can't put several thousand euros into buying a product that's only going to last 2 or 3 months. There's a narrative to all this. To hear that you can just, you can throw it away like a Kleenex, I just couldn't believe my eyes or my ears. All right then. So yes, advertising has its virtues, but authenticity, I like that word, traceability. We heard it on everybody's mouths, value usage and all that. Thanks very much to one and all around the table, Charles, Clément, Geraldine, Pierre, Benoit. It's very accurate and clear what you've said. It's important for people to have a hands-on view of things. So thanks very much for giving that pragmatic approach. Now we're going to hear some pitches from startups, future world of fashion. Please stay with us, and then afterwards you can mingle. And there's the networking, as I said, at 6 p.m. for the mingling. Thanks very much, dear friends.